That's right. It's Dr. Venkman. Actually, it's Fantasy. Good morning, ladies and germs. Gridiron 360. I got Dave sitting across the way.
Can you hear me, Johnny?
I am the Bill Manis. And we are here with you this morning to talk about fantasy football, my favorite day cast of the week. I love all of them, but I do love talking fantasy because most of it's off the cuff. If you don't know, we do try to quasi-script things for our college and NFL talk, but for fantasy, it's up in the air. So we're going to roll through a little week 5 action coming off that, and looking into week 6, we're going to try to keep this cast, it to about an hour or less, but we are going to switch it up a little bit for you because most of these fantasy casts have been directed towards that season-long fantasy league you may play in. So after we're done with that conversation, we're going to stop and we're going to put up another cast to talk daily fantasy football. For those of you that don't play but are football lovers, especially fantasy, get involved. It's fun, isn't it, Dave?
It's the best.
Yay! Win some money, lose some money. Either way, have fun doing it. Makes football even more relevant than it already is. So let's dive right in to our season-long conversation on this cast. My brother, how you doing? How'd it go last week for you?
Fantasy sucks.
I lost in every league, got throttled. I don't know what happened. You're talking a just under 60-point day for Aaron Jones. You're talking 60 points from a Philadelphia defense. You're talking Michael Thomas throwing up 40-plus. Yeah, and I started out the weekend with just under 42 from Russ Wilson and just under 30 from Cooper Kupp, while my opponent had Chris Carson, did well, just under 34. But I was looking good going into the weekend, and that fell to pieces. I lost like 245 to 185. Monster day for my opponent, not so much for me. Nonetheless, still in the runnings. That's in our league, the one that you and I are in. In my other leagues, I'm still 1 win and the rest losses. But it is still early. A lot of fantasy seasons kind of wrap around that week 12 before folks get into those weeks at the end of the season where they'll bench some of their starters. We ended early, obviously, as a lot of leagues do, so that the playoffs can have some relevance as well. So really, we're at about the halfway mark. And I say that to say, listen, wipe the slate clean, even if you're in last place. If you can turn it around here the rest of the season, most leagues, I'm sure you'll have a shot if you make it work. So yeah, that's what I'm going to try to do. Make the right choices. And, not just myself, but other teams, they are going to be dealing with bye weeks. So it's about making the right plays and matching up against your opponent the correct way and trying to pull yourself out the W.
Yeah, you got to go with this is the time of year as this is actually the first week where we've got 4 teams on a bye. So this is where, we told you in the beginning of the year, the first, 4 weeks, I believe, are non-bye weeks, or maybe 3 weeks.
3.
This is, where you say trust where you drafted. And even though I admittedly have gone against that a couple of times myself and paid the price, this is where your moves have to make sense because now you've got to adjust your roster to play some level of matchups because of the buys that you're running into. You've probably come across some injuries. There's been some decent injuries, meaning decent players have been injured early in the season. I mean, this week, I just got to say it. I in our league, I scored 182 points, which was below my projection by about 11 points. But I just got Christian McCaffrey'd and Philadelphia Eagled. I mean, you could drive a bus up my keister after these guys went at me because it was awful. I mean, he had 124 plus points off 2 positions.
Yeah,
I'm going to chalk this one up as crap happens. The good part is I'm still in the lead in the league from a record standpoint, though he did overtake me, the next guy in points overall. So as a tiebreaker, he's got that. And, just crazy things happen. And not that McCaffrey's not a surprise, doesn't surprise me too much given he's an MVP candidate this year. Philadelphia, well, let me just say this. Jets, screw you. Screw you, New York Jets. All right? Because you suck in ways that only the Miami Dolphins and the Washington Redskins thought possible.
I know. I'm wondering now that they're saying Darnold's back from the smoochy smooch disease, if that'll change things a bit offensively for them. Maybe not tremendously, but maybe not be it is, like you said, like Miami, Washington, the Jets. There's a few teams that are just god-awful. I hate to lump the Giants in there because we've had injuries and we're kind of on the come, I feel like. But, defensively, outside of that inside and the D tackles, it's not been good. We've kind of been a doormat, too. Got railroaded by Kirk Cousins this weekend, who we know is... But he looked wonderful. Against us, he looked wonderful. And it's not going to get any better for the Giants traveling to New England on Thursday. So, it's most of these teams that are really bad. It's hard because but you can play that matchup game on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. And I said that from the beginning. That's why it's smart to just take your defense last or next to last because you get to this point, you never know what's going to happen. I have Baltimore's D in just about all my leagues. They have a good matchup this weekend, but they have definitely not been doing what I expect. Even on years that you don't expect it to be great, they're solid as all get out. Yeah, no, not so much.
Yep.
So now I'm playing the game. Fortunately, I didn't go high to get them. They kind of fell to me in that last or next to last pick. But I'm playing the roulette game there, where it's every week what's the best matchup I can potentially get points out of for my defense.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that probably in our next segment, what's going on with defenses and what the plays are for the week. But, overall, that I understand that strategy. I have to admit I didn't play that strategy. Again, my draft, to me, felt kind of funny. I can't complain in the sense that I am, competing. But you get to this point and things just start happening. And defenses are one area where you can be flexible from week to week. This week, however, I will say, is a bit of an anomaly. And really it has to do with a lot of times when you go and target a defense, you go look at who's the terrible teams in the league.
Yeah.
Well, the terrible teams seem to be playing each other this week.
The terrible play the terrible, so it's really a guessing game. And to be honest with you, I talked about it earlier in the car. A friend of ours that's in another league that I play in, Angelo, he had Phillies D. He was playing streaming games. He had him last week. Great call. And he got all stoked. He's like, I got Washington's D. He dropped Phillies D for Washington's D. Why? Well, they're playing Miami. Makes sense. Only problem is Washington's offense and defense are not very good either. So I don't know if that's going to work out. Maybe I'll end up being wrong, and it'll be just a wonderful play by him. But in my mind, that's not as much of a slam dunk as he might have thought grabbing Phillies D against the Jets for last week.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of dicey that way. So that's something to pay attention to, and I would say, and I did kind of mention already, in this week in particular, this is why you can play for the long term in your leagues. You got to play for the long term, but you do have to constantly be looking at the short term. That's kind of the fun thing about DFS is it allows you to look at the short term and only the short term. And it's amazing how it will change your projections on things. So it's kind of a neat, fun thing. If you don't do it, It's great because it's just can be a couple of bucks if you're not a big gambler, but man, it's fun. It makes the game fun.
It's like, some of those big contests, you look at people that go out there and spend $1, $2, $20 a day or a week, whatever, on lottery. This is the odds obviously are better because you don't have as many people and you have somewhat control over it. Obviously, anything can happen, but you do actually have a say. You're not just getting dealt random numbers like, oh, ho, ho, pray, pray. But it's been a little bit kooky even there. I will say if you're a person that follows any kind of fantasy talk or strategies from a draft perspective, one of the things some people talk about is the 0 running back strategy, depending on where your draft slot is. In one of my leagues, not this one, the other one, I was 8 out of 8, and so I've never done the 0 running back strategy, but the way it fell, all the running backs that I felt were worth the hoot were off the board at 8, and DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams were still there, so I went back to back with those receivers, 0 running back strategy. I won't do it again, and it's not. I mean, obviously Devontae had a great week, the week before last, not playing this week because of the turf toe. DeAndre Hopkins we're still waiting for. And I expect both those guys to the rest of the season to, for the most part, be on the plus side.
Sure.
But they'll have their games. I mean, it's going to happen because they're number one receivers. They're going to have the number one corners on them. They're going to be double covered, triple. They're going to be schemed against.
Right.
So, but I said, I'm not going to do that 0 running back strategy anymore unless I absolutely have no other options. I mean, holy mackerel, just getting in last place. I've never had this. I'm typically, if not winning a league in the championship game, at least making the playoffs, which is top 4. And like I said at the beginning of the cast, it's time for me to wipe the slate clean and turn it on this back half just so I can get into those playoffs. So we will see. So let's start the fantasy cast as we do and roll through position groups, talk about some things we saw and maybe some potential pickups for week 6. You want to start with quarterback?
Sure, let's do it. Start with the man in the middle.
The man with the plan. So last week was I have Russ Wilson in one of my leagues. Fantastic week for him last week. He continues to get it done. Started off the year a little bit slow, but has continued to get better and better and better every week. This is a veteran. This is a guy, it doesn't matter if he has all sorts of weapons around him or he doesn't. He knows how to win, and with either his arms or his legs, and you've said it many times about Russ Wilson, he can scramble and move around, but he is always keeping his eyes downfield, looking to throw. And, it proved positive in one of my leagues.
Probably another thing, too, I like about Russell Wilson, and this is where I think sometimes fantasy fans kind of cool on him a little bit, is if you're watching him play in the second quarter, and you're looking at your point totals and you go, God, he's killing me in this game. He's killing me. This is a fourth quarter guy. He's the guy that all of a sudden you'll be like, damn, where did those 14 points come from? And he's done it at the end. I always preach consistency. This is a guy that if you don't get on the front end of the quarterback picks and you're able to get this guy in like quarterback number, I'd say anywhere from you're a gold mine if you're 6 to 12, even the 5 slot, because he's going to produce points every week. Now, you don't want to, he's not a guy you're going to hang your hat on, giving you the big numbers all the time. But he's going to be very, very solid. And again, I've said consistency is the manner. And if you can get him at the 6 through 12 quarterback pick, that is tremendous value on this guy. I love him. And he is having a great year. So it's on top of that. And his game last week was
great. And you're right. And even if they're, losing, which even if the Seahawks typically don't get down by a ton when they're losing, but even if they're losing, you can count on that, garbage time points, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So it was a good week for Russ, but he wasn't the number one quarterback last week. The number one was my man, Deshaun Watson. Just absolutely goes crazy. What do you have? 5 TDs, 426 yards. Will Fuller was the beneficiary of just about all of it. I put a little funny post on our Facebook page, which was a post game presser from last week. Deshaun speaking about the Falcons, but it was actually dubbed over. So, it wasn't him actually talking. Did you hear it?
No, I did. I'm going to have to look at
He's
it.
like, the Falcons off the defense. Great, man. Like, they line up and, we're able to run it down the middle, and they have these guys spread out, and they don't have anyone in the middle, and we're successfully going up the middle. And then I look over, I'm like, hey, do you guys not want to cover the middle a little bit? Looking at their defense, hey, you guys want to squeeze in and cover the middle? And, no, we're good. Okay, then we'll go up the middle. We'll go to outside. Looked up to the crowd, say, hey, you want to come down here and run routes for us because they can't cover it? Awesome. Awesome.
And unfortunately, probably true.
Yes, probably true. Let's see. Who else had a good week last week? Matt Ryan did well. 330 yards, 3 TDs and a pick, and a losing effort to Deshaun. You got to understand, the Texans put 53 on the Falcons, so they were playing catch-up the whole game.
Yeah, fair amount of garbage in that one.
But, in fantasy football, if you can predict that potential, having to play catch-up the whole game, the team having to catch up more than likely is going to be throwing the ball, which works into the quarterback's favor.
Yeah. I think you probably kind of really this week is more of a week of disappointment on some of the heavier guys. Pat Mahomes put up the yards, one touchdown. So it was what me as a Mahomes owner, I was expecting a nice rebound. Did not happen. It's going to have to happen this week against Houston because, as you can see, they're starting to tune it up offensively. Lamar Jackson did well on the ground. His yards weren't great, and he did have 3 picks, so you had that one. Dak Prescott.
They were, again, that's a situation where they were getting their butts kicked.
Yep.
And so he ended up okay. I mean, he ended up 463 yards, 2 TDs, 3 picks.
Yep.
But, and points-wise, it was good. It was probably better than average. But, again, they were playing catch-up. And to be honest with you, I didn't necessarily expect that in that game. Based on the way Dallas's D has been playing, I thought it would have been much closer. Maybe they would have kept the ball on the ground with Zeke and slowed the game down. Certainly, the Packers kept the ball on the ground, but I guess there were just like gaping holes because Aaron Jones was just going all over the place.
Yep. Rodgers only put up yards though in that game, so you didn't get the benefit of any touchdowns.
Yeah.
It was
Carson Wentz. I
week.
had predicted as the number 1 fantasy quarterback. It didn't happen. It was their defense won that game. Obviously, he only had 189 yards and 1 TD. Very un-Wentz-like.
Yep. Yeah.
But Kirk Cousins actually ended up doing well, as I said. Brady, pretty good day. I mean, they were playing Washington. Kyler Murray, good day out of him. They were playing Cincinnati. They got their first win. The Cardinals did. This Minshew kid.
Yep.
He continues to do some stuff, bro. I mean, I'm looking down his game log, and, he's passed for 2 TDs in every game but 1, at least 2.
Yep.
Or 2, no more than that. Aside from the first week that he came in against Kansas City where he threw 1 pick, he hasn't thrown a pick. And he's gone 275, 213, 204, 213, 374. Nothing, 374 is great. Those other are not phenomenal, but I mean, it's solid. When you're looking at maybe needing somebody coming into these bye weeks that'll give you a floor, it's looking like this guy's floor is pretty solid.
And they're going to have to sling it just with the way their team's at right now. They have played from behind probably more than you want. But you look at the matchup, and he is definitely a good bye-week pickup, I think. I would definitely put him on there.
Teddy Bridgewater, man.
Yep.
It's kind of hit or miss, but he put it together this week against the Buccaneers. We'll see if that continues at Jacksonville. Jacksonville, we just saw that Ramsey may practice this week from the back thing. It's way more than the back that's holding him out of that. But regardless, the best part about Jacksonville's D is their secondary. They have been able to be run on. We saw that last week with Mr. McCaffrey's. So, maybe it's not such a great day from that perspective, but we'll see. Again, when you're talking about bye weeks, you try to find somebody that's got a good potential matchup that has a higher floor.
Yep.
I understand that you want to get that blow-up game if possible, but if you're just subbing someone out from the guy you drafted, you really should be thinking, let me find someone that's got a higher floor than who's going to be the blow-up of the week.
Yeah, probably another one to look at in that category because, two's coincidence, three's a trend, is Winston. Winston is, again, not going to probably blow the doors off. He had one really big game, but he is quietly putting together a solid season, throwing for 275 probably in a couple of scores. Again, that's if you're in the need for that. I don't know that these guys are going to be game breakers for you or where you're dropping your guys. But, some traditional guys that at least put up yards like a Phillip Rivers, he had a very, very subpar day, which usually at the very least you can count on 300 yards and at least a touchdown out of him. You're not getting that right now. So, it was definitely a quirky week. As you can see, more people got wrong than got right. It'll remain to be seen. Probably someone like the Dallas trend to me is a little bit concerning because it's 2 games in a row at home. They put up points, but how they put them up, and it's a concern, as they play some of these other teams. Quarterback position was really strange this week.
It was. So let's talk about next week and some of the matchups coming for quarterbacks.
Sure.
and what we think might happen. Right off the top, I've got, in terms of projections, I see Mahomes up there. I see Watson up there. I see Lamar. I see Russ. What say you? I mean, like Mahomes, this could be obviously a shootout against the Texans. Neither D is incredible, but Mahomes a little gimpy. They say he'll be fine. But, he hurt this ankle earlier in the year. He's been able to play through it fairly well, and he took a not such a great little lick to it, and it hampered him this past week. So I mean, he takes one of those again, and then it could hamper him. I'm not saying it could knock him out, but it could hamper him, and therefore it could impede his production.
Yeah, well, I think definitely it's something he's going to have all year is my kind of feeling on it. Once you do it in week 1 and then you get hit in week 5, it kind of just struggles to get better. Plus teams will keep an eye on it. I like this matchup. I mean, because I like it, I'm sure the score will be probably, 13-10.
I know.
But
it's so crazy.
But this is a game where what I like about it is, I said this before in our NFL recap, is that Deshaun Watson, the biggest stat of all those stats that he had that you did not mention was 0 sacks.
Yeah, you got it.
And that is huge because that allows him to do what he's skilled to do. Coming in against a KC defense that's not terribly prolific in the passing attack, and that includes their pass rush. You may give him an opportunity to do that. And Mahomes, I mean, Houston has not played to their level of defense all year that we were used to, at least in that sense. So that could allow Mahomes some time. So I think,
especially in their front.
Yeah, that allows for that
time,
shootout.
That's trouble.
Right. And then, I kind of always been a little guarded with Lamar Jackson. Again, I think he's a good, especially on the fantasy aspect, he's a good quarterback because even in his bad game, he put 70 yards on the ground. Unfortunately, he gave them pretty much all those points back with interceptions. That's just kind of the way it is. Russell Wilson, against Cleveland, I'm not sure. It could be if they get up by like 3 scores, they could pound it out on the ground because the one thing about this team is they'll play you anyway.
Yeah, well, they're going to pound it anyway. They still run the right, even though it was a little off last week from their typical. But you're right.
Russell Wilson will. I think Russell Wilson will get his points. It may just not be this blow up day.
Yeah,
given the matchup.
Keep in mind, in season long, the guys we just mentioned are all rostered, so you're rolling them out there. We're just kind of talking about it in their matchups. And as we go through this, we'll talk about some guys that may not be rostered again if you have a bye week, putting some guys in. But yeah, I mean, Russ is going to be rostered. You're rolling him out there. You got, again, the defensive ugliness with Arizona and with Atlanta, and the two of them are going head-to-head. So you got Matt Ryan and Kyler Murray. How you feeling about this?
I'm liking Kyler Murray big time on this.
Better than Matt?
Yeah.
I'm right with you, dude. I think that he's going to at least run for one and throw for one.
Yeah, I could see him throwing for a couple in this
He
game.
started the run more. People
Yeah.
were wondering at the beginning of the year, and last week you saw it. I mean, last week he went, let's see, what did he do on the ground? He had 6 for there. Yeah, he had some yards. I think he
Yeah.
came close to 100, like 90 yards or something.
Yeah, he
on
was
6. And the guy, when he gets like that, especially against a defense like the Falcons, who I haven't seen them be able to set an edge.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to see them contain a quarterback, and if he finds a crack, he's going to start scooting.
Yeah, and in a way, again, I've talked about the Atlanta Falcons' undersized defensive line. That makes it harder. You've got a small quarterback. Just as much as the quarterback's got to be able to see over his line, defenders got to be able to find quarterbacks behind the offensive line too, as well, and that makes it even trickier. Kyler Murray is not one in my mind, and this just to me is he's just got no weapons like he needs to have. But he's the kind of guy, like, he doesn't get rattled. That's just not his thing. So I think this is a perfect opportunity, especially at home, for them to maybe show off a little bit of the future for the crowd. Matt Ryan will probably get yards because Arizona's bad. I could see this where it's garbage time stuff too. I mean, granted, I think the Falcons can stay in this a lot more than against Houston, but I don't know. There's something about this game. I think Kyler Murray could be a top pick, a top quarterback this week.
Yeah. The only concern I have with Kyler is that the one thing the Falcons do have on defense is Deion Jones at linebacker, who's very fast. And when they have a weapon on the offensive side of the ball that they're facing, like Kyler Murray,
Yep.
he will spy him all game. He will be, and he's fast, so
Yep.
he will spy
Yep.
him all game. So you will probably see somewhere, it's the two of them in open field. So who's going to make the play? But I still think this is a great play for Murray, for Matt Ryan. Arizona's been giving it up to the tight end all year long. Austin Hooper has been one of the highest tight ends, not just NFL but in fantasy, and he's been very popular for Matt Ryan because he's just, getting happy feet, not thinking he can fit a ball in anywhere or throw somebody open. So he dumps it down to the tight end across the middle, whatever. Expect to see that. We'll talk more about that. But, Brady against the G-Men, oh, man. Could be ugly for my Giants. Our secondary is not that great. So this could be the week that you see Brady throw 4 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. It wouldn't surprise me one.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you.
It will happen.
With the exception of one game, that's been your defense is better than some of the defenses he's faced at this point. Again, I will always say this on fantasy. You can go with Tom Brady. You'll get something, and sometimes you'll get awesome. But I'm just telling you, Bill Belichick devises his game plan to piss off fantasy owners. He just does it. And he's that good. Like, he can do that. It's kind of like Muhammad Ali calling his round. He can do that to anybody. But yeah, I mean, it certainly is a favorable matchup. It's a team, but it's also a team, the Giants, they could get down early because they're void of a lot of weapons this week, and maybe even more than current state. I still haven't heard back on Evan Ingram, but you've definitely got Saquon out. You've definitely got Gallman out. You've definitely got Shepard out. I mean, those are 3 biggest weapons right now.
Yep. So, I mean, that kind of runs down the list of quarterbacks this week. Some guys that, again, most of those guys are rostered. Some guys that I'm seeing in our leagues that aren't, that might be worth a gander if you've got a bye week or a tough matchup with a so-so guy. We mentioned Gardner Minshew just because the floor is pretty good. Phil Rivers is at home Sunday night against Pittsburgh. I think, especially with the third-string quarterback coming in for Pittsburgh, their offense may not help their defense much, which may play into Rivers' hands.
Sure.
So, again, from a floor perspective, that's what I'm saying here. I don't see anybody on the wire I want to, go out on a limb and say it's going to be a blow-up game. But from a floor perspective, Stafford Monday night against Green Bay, that could be a game where points are on the board, could be a decent floor for him. Yep. And maybe Bridgewater because they're playing Jacksonville and, maybe something happened there.
Sure.
Again, I'm talking floor. If I was to look at one of those guys, Rivers and Minshew are the ones I'm staring down the hardest if they're out on the wire.
Yep.
So, all right, let's jump into running backs from last week, and then we'll talk about this coming week. So last week was, Christian McCaffrey stole the show again. Obviously, due to Saquon's injury, from when you drafted, most people probably drafted Saquon number 1 overall. McCaffrey falling to 2 or 3, depending on how you had Kamara. Right now, McCaffrey is the draft pick of the year.
Yep.
If you picked him up, you're clicking your heels. I know he gets a ton of work. I know people are a little concerned about maybe that wearing him down because it's a long season. He's a young guy. This guy's in shape. I don't think it's going to stop at all. We've said it over and over. This offense runs through Christian McCaffrey. And right now, they're right there. And
Yep.
It's starting to separate in the NFC South, where it's New Orleans and Carolina are going to be the ones to look to duke it out. And, so they're going to have to roll him as much as they can.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I mean, McCaffrey was awesome. You don't ever take him out of your lineup unless he's on a bye. That's just there's no way around it, and you're going to do well with that in your lineup. So
Aaron Jones, great week. Probably played him. If not in your RB2, you're in your flex, just because he is a good running back and the number 1 running back, and especially with Jamal Williams getting hurt a few weeks ago, who was kind of eating into his carries. That's not so much. He went crazy with the 4 TDs, 19 carries for $107, another 7 receptions for 75. Great week. They go to we'll talk about next week in a minute. Who else we got up here? We got
David Johnson had a pretty solid day too as well, because he got a lot of work through the air too as well.
That will continue. Because I have him in a team, and that's where he's been saving my fantasy points through the air.
Yeah. And again, we talked about the matchup with Atlanta. I think Kyler Murray with a check down opportunity to him in tough situations or play breakdowns, that bodes well for David Johnson too as well. Dalvin Cook had another strong game this week. He
21 for $132.
Yep.
Didn't score at all, but also had 6 receptions for 86. I mean, it's against the Giants. I was watching, and that sucks, but I predicted that he would have a good game.
Well, I would tell you this. If they would have had 1 yard to go on the goal line in this game, and I said it last time, they would have thrown the ball every time. They had to get Kirk Cousins some numbers in this game. Don't look for that to be how they ride out the rest of the year. Dalvin Cook is the engine to that offense, no matter what anybody says, as long as he's healthy. So he's a play against Philadelphia. Tougher team. It's not the Jets. I do believe Dalvin can run on Philadelphia, but probably look for some more modest numbers than what you're seeing.
You're rolling him out. He's
absolutely.
number 1 back. Leonard Fournette had another good game. He continues to progress.
Yep.
Definitely, he is the guy. 23 carries for 108 and 1 touchdown, 4 receptions for 29 yards. Did really well. Chris Carson had another good day as well.
Yep.
The fumbles are not as much of a problem. He had 27 for $118 and then 1 reception for 5 yards and a TD. So he got it done. There's a couple guys up here in this top, though, that we haven't mentioned that kind of I didn't see it coming. Now, I mean, Matt Breida.
Yep.
11 carries for 114. This is a week where Tevin Coleman was back. They didn't start Coleman, but they rolled him in, and at the end of the day, Coleman ended up being the guy that got most of the touches. So if you have him, or if he was dropped, go get him. He had 16 touches for 97 and a touchdown. I expect that to continue to progress. But Matt Breida comes out with an 80-yard touchdown from scrimmage right out first play of the game for San Francisco's offense. Again, 11 for 114 and a touchdown. Another 3 receptions for 15 yards and a touchdown. He went crazy. We'll talk more about DFS strategies in that offense, but we talked about it in our NFL recap. They're running the ball very well because it's an old school type system. It's 5 good offensive linemen up there, dropping 2 tight ends up there, and dropping a fullback in use check, and they're just pounding you and saying, stop us. And it really is kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
I mean, because I love points and I love seeing the the ball in the air and fast paced, but it's also very nice to see something like this. So kudos to him. The other guy that really was my biggest surprise of the weekend was Josh Jacobs.
Yep.
And not because Jacobs isn't any good. We've seen some good stuff out of him. A little inconsistent in terms of his numbers, but I don't really put that on him as much as I put it on the play calling in Oakland and his opportunities at the right time. Because he had a good week against Indy, 17 for 79, no scores. But outside of that, the first week against Denver, 23 for 85 and 2 touchdowns. But that was a blow-up week. But then this week, and not just that, they're traveling to London. I usually feel like those games are slower pace, lower scoring, and he's facing the Bears D. That's the biggest thing. I just would never have predicted that. I mean, maybe if it was something like, he got it done through the air. Well, he did have 3 receptions for 20 yards through the air, but it was on the ground, and that surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears D did not look anything like the Bears D we've seen in the first several weeks. And a credit to them. The game plan they had was good. They got the ball out quickly, but they smashed the middle of the Bears front. The interior linebackers for the Bears did not play well in this game. Obviously then you don't add any pass rush, and we got down big, and he was the bell cow. He got it done. It was I like Josh Jacobs. I think Josh Jacobs has got a good future in the NFL, and he showed us why against probably one of the toughest defenses he's going to face all year.
Yep. Let's see. Who else? Mark Ingram had an okay day. 19 carries for 44 yards, 2 receptions for 5. But he saw the end zone on the ground. We've said it before. Ingram is touchdown dependent. If he can get in the end zone, then he's worth something to you. And he's a guy that could get in the end zone multiple times. But if he doesn't get in the end zone, 19 for 44 is not so good. So you got to watch that.
Yeah, probably one thing to flag too here is for those of you that have been living the high life riding Austin Eckler, we had the return of Melvin Gordon. There was talk about him doing it last week, and nothing came of it. They really messed with their game plan, and it was to their detriment. They had a really poor game. I think it was a bad call. Eckler still did well through the air.
He did.
But he had, I think, 13 carries for Melvin Gordon in that game, or 12 carries.
Yeah, I mean,
so
Eckler had 3 carries for 7 yards.
Right.
He had 15 receptions for 86, but he only had 3 carries. You're right. I just... in my mind, if you're they know they're gonna have to deal with this contract at the end of the year with Gordon anyway. And if you're getting what you're getting out of Eckler, I'd almost be like, why are we gonna pay the money to that guy? Why don't we pay the money to somebody else that we could use?
I really feel like the Chargers are forcing this one with Melvin Gordon, and it's to their detriment. The question is, did they learn a lesson from last week and go ahead and start handing the ball back to Austin Eckler and make Melvin Gordon earn it with limited touches and going to have to put up big runs and big plays? Or do they continue to try to feed it back to Melvin Gordon? In a fantasy sense, this is a disaster for a guy that had been producing for a lot of teams this year on the fantasy side. Just wasn't pretty. Another guy who had a really big day not this past week, but the week before, was Jordan Howard.
Yeah.
He had an okay day, but it was kind of limited.
Came back down to earth a bit.
Yeah, Philadelphia scored 2 touchdowns on defense, so that really helped him and probably, brought out everybody in this game. But Jordan Howard still had 60 yards on the ground, I think, on 13 attempts, 62 yards, something like that, and a touch. So,
that's still a mixed backfield.
Yep.
But there could be those weeks where they roll him. Some other guys of note that had subpar days in my mind. Nick Chubb, coming off that huge week, only had 16 for 87, but didn't see the end zone. But they didn't commit to it. They let Baker throw it, and that when they rolled with Chubb and then played Baker off of that, they do well.
Yep.
Joe Mixon, I thought he was in a great situation against Arizona. he had 93 yards on 19 carries, but it wasn't great from a fantasy perspective. Le'Veon and Zeke, both of them. I mean, maybe with Darnold back, Le'Veon has more value. Zeke, he's still waiting for, if you draft him even 2, or 1. I mean, you're still kind of waiting for that Zeke type day. Haven't seen it. Kamara had, the Tampa Bay defense, we talked about it, number 1 rush defense in the league, and they held him out of the end zone and held him in check, 16 for 62 on the ground, 6 for 42 in the air. One other guy that I want to make note that actually fell, it looks like number 10. I did say I thought he would have a good week against Washington. That was Sony Michel, 16 for 91 and a touch, 3 receptions for 32. So he had an above average week from what he's been doing.
Yep.
So let's talk about this week. Some players to watch for, obviously McCaffrey. They've got is that a London game? Sunday, 9:30? That must be. Tampa Bay?
Yeah.
Yep. So, you're going to roll with those guys. I think this is going to be a great week for Kamara. They're playing at Jacksonville. We saw what McCaffrey did to Jacksonville, both on the ground and through the air. Kamara can do those same things. I think it's a great week for him. I look at possibly another good day out of David Johnson, because you're talking about the Falcons.
Yep, I agree.
Sure.
I agree.
I don't know. I think this is a Mark Ingram, another week that could be good for him. They're playing Cincinnati at home. I think that, again, he's touchdown dependent. I could see him getting in once, maybe more than that.
Yeah,
I
really like Chris Carson. If you watched any of the Cleveland-San Francisco game, you could have driven a bus through some of the holes that those running backs were seeing. And Chris Carson, power runner, strong runner, could benefit from that. Certainly, I could see him getting a lot of carries, especially if they get ahead in this game. Again, the problem is you don't necessarily know which Cleveland's going to show up, but really in 4 out of 5 games, that I've seen, it wasn't the great Cleveland team, and I just think Seattle's ability to take that, to the bank on them is going to happen. So I like Chris Carson. One I will add who's been kind of a disappointment this year, and I've got him myself, is James Conner. I'm scared about the fact that they lost their second string quarterback now, but just something to be aware of that. Jalen Samuels is hurt and will be out for a month. So that's probably going to lead to Connor getting a little bit more touches. So if you're in a PPR
league, they have a
league,
third-string quarterback coming in.
Yeah. So now the question is, again, and the Chargers came off an awful week last week. It's a little bit of a gamble because it's at home for the Chargers, and if they can get a rebound, you could end up in a point situation. The good part is Connor can catch the ball. So he's probably a little better than he's been in the past, but still, definitely not an RB1 type play or anything like that. But you might see a little bounce from him. Like you mentioned, Le'Veon Bell. I guess I kind of look at it, I go, they got to be 8 points better. They got to be able to get an extra touchdown out of Darnold being in there. And
you hope so.
You
hope it takes a little more. Because up to this point with Darnold out, you saw it was Le'Veon this, Le'Veon that, snap Le'Veon the ball. It's all they've had. So hopefully Darnold can take a little bit of that pressure off of Le'Veon, and then he can do his thing.
Yeah, one thing I have noticed too, just something to keep an eye on. I've got him on my bench, and he's going to stay there for a little while, but I've noticed that Carlos Hyde's lead rusher role is increasing a little bit more each day.
Solidified that role.
Yeah,
man.
like he's got it, but it's, at first it was like, all right, he was getting 12, 13 carries. He's starting to get above the 15 carry mark, catch a couple of balls. Question is, will they get him in the end zone? But just something to watch as that offense evolves a little bit, because I think that really helps keep the sack monster from coming after Deshaun. So, those are some ones that, maybe a little further down the line where you might have to make some choices this week that could be some good opportunities for you.
Yeah. Let's see. You got, Henry. If you have him, you're probably firing him up. Denver's defense, I think that they can, both Eckler and Gordon had decent days last week, and that was against Denver's defense. So there can be something to be had there. We'll see if Kerryon Johnson continues production against Green Bay. They stymied Zeke last week, the Green Bay defense, and I would say that Zeke is better than Carry-On. So
Is that game in oh no, it's in Green Bay.
that game is
They're
in Green Bay.
they're a little bit better. Detroit generally gives Green Bay a run for their money and then loses at the end to Aaron Rodgers in Detroit. Green Bay can be a little bit different. Good part is it's earlier in the season, so it's not like it's going to be a weather game.
Yep. I think, Len will be fine. Len Fournette should continue his thing. I think, we saw a couple weeks ago Ronald Jones kind of have his little first big game in the NFL. Last week, not so much. But, they have Carolina, whose run defense is not that great. And so, this could be a game where Ronald Jones maybe does a little something for you. If he's on the wire, you need somebody, throw him in there. Damian Williams came back for KC last week. Didn't do so great. However, this week they do have Houston. And we know that there should, as in terms of what we think, there should be points on the board. He's a guy that can also catch the ball. I think he's coming back to solidifying his lead role. McCoy didn't do so great last week, had less touches than Williams, with Williams coming back off an injury. And LaShawn McCoy fumbled the ball, and then you really didn't see him the rest of the game. Damian Williams, a lot of people may have picked him up, third or fourth back, flex, something like that, to have him in there. Maybe this is a week where you get, above average production from him.
Yep.
All right. Let's jump into wide receivers, my man. Wide receiver. So this past week, from the wide receiver pool, hands down, Will Fuller, due to those touchdowns that Deshaun threw, Will Fuller had 4 of them. Four,
I think three.
I thought he had 4.
Might have had 4.
No,
Well, he had 5 touchdowns.
I'm looking at 14 receptions, 217 yards, 3 TDs. That was it. He
What
had
a
3,
chump.
but 217 yards. He did great. And, if he's out there, he's someone definitely worth a roster. Despite, and like I said, DeAndre Hopkins will get some things together, and you'll get what you expect out of him. But don't get it twisted. Every defense that goes against the Texans is, they're game planning against DeAndre Hopkins or Deshaun Watson. But from the receiver perspective, or even the skill position, receiver, running back, they're looking at DeAndre Hopkins. So it's going to leave a guy like Fuller, who does have speed and is good, and that he does have a rapport with Deshaun. It's going to leave him opportunities. So you're not going to get these boom games, but I did hear something last week, Fuller last year had like 3 straight games where he went like over 100 yards and like a TD or 2, and then like 3 where he was off. So maybe he's about to run in that. That was the first of a little bit of a streak, whether it be 2, 3, or more games. Amari Cooper had a really good game, but they were losing. It was garbage time, and he was the man for them. And end up putting up 226 yards. I mean, just insane. I got to be honest. Like 200 yards for a receiver is a lot of yards.
Oh, yeah.
And you had 4 receivers go over 150. I think 150 is really good. And if you go over that, that's unreal. So you had him. You had Michael Thomas go 11 for $182, 2 TDs. You had DJ Chark go for 8 receptions, 164, 2 TDs. It's just these receivers blowing up. Cooper Kupp continues to be Goff's favorite guy. He had 117 yards on 9 receptions and a TD. Allen Robinson, and to my detriment, I have him on a team on the bench, and I think I played him 1 week, and it wasn't the week I should have played him. Not that it was horrible, but he has been real good, man. I mean, very consistent.
Failure on this team has been on the quarterbacking with him. I've watched obviously all the games as a big Bears fan. He has gone and gotten a lot of tough balls. So like it's not like he's got to get wide open to do it. He is catching tough contested balls. So I guess my point of that is take a look out to see if Mitch Trubisky, when he gets back in, how he looks from an injury standpoint and how he looks from a quarterbacking standpoint. But that's one that later in the season could end up being a good play because both quarterbacks love him. It's just whether they're good enough to get him the ball.
Sure. Let's see who else. Tyler Boyd continues to be consistent. Had a very good day last week. 10 for 123 and a touchdown. Let's see who else. We had Godwin continues to do his thing. 7 for $125 and 2. And it's not just that, but Mike Evans didn't see a single catch that game.
Which means he's due for a 3-touchdown performance in the game you least expect it to happen.
You got a little something out of Adam Thielen with a couple of TDs, 7 for $130 and 2 TDs against my Giants. I still, and I think Thielen's a great player. The problem is Kirk Cousins, and they played my secondary. So.
Yeah, I do want to say this one thing about Thielen, and maybe this is a little bit of a note on personality here. But after the game before last, was a Bears game where they just throttled them, and they couldn't get any passing going. Thielen came out and said, and the right way, I believe, was, we've got to be able to pass the ball. Used the word "we" a lot. Said we've got to support the run game. We're not going to win if we don't do this. Whereas Stephon Diggs had an underlying making comments to other people saying, maybe I want to be traded. I'm not happy. I'm not coming to practice, and got a big fine. What I think is interesting, and this is from a fantasy perspective, is Thielen had a much more productive day and was much more targeted. I just would say this. They have to throw. Cousins is going to have to throw for the rest of the season and throw more than he's been throwing. And I don't think he's going to be looking Diggs' way a lot. I think he's going to be looking at Thielen. What I could see this with Thielen is a better low floor, his floor, than it's certainly been so far. See him with a minimum of 6 catches in a game. The question is Cousins good enough to get him anything deep? But they are going to look for him to throw around the end zone. So you just watch to see if Thielen becomes a little bit stronger because, again, I saw how it was played in the press and the attitude, and it seems to me like Cousins apologized to Thielen, didn't apologize to Diggs.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting.
Thielen, I thought the order of it chronologically, Thielen said his thing. Cousins
after the game,
apologized after that, and then after that is when Diggs started fussing.
Right, but all the Diggs stuff is kind of underneath the surface, which would not shock me that it's not well known on the sidelines. I guess my point is when he apologized to Thielen, as opposed to apologizing to the receivers or even to Thielen and Diggs.
Yeah.
It just, I guess
he
my
knows
point
his
is,
place.
I think Thielen's going to get fed the ball is my point from a fantasy perspective. Again, I'm not saying that he's prolific enough to get, not Thielen, but Cousins isn't prolific enough to get him the ball to where he's the blow-up player he was last year. But I certainly see his floor increasing and a little bit more solid, maybe a wide receiver 3 type play each week.
Sure. A couple other guys I just want to mention that really, subpar, I would say, for them. Juju Smith-Schuster had an okay game, 7 for 75, did get in the end zone.
Quarterback issue in that game, too, again.
But you haven't – this has been maybe his best game this year, it may not get better with this third-string quarterback. We don't know. Calvin Ridley has been hit or miss, was 5 for 88 and a touchdown. So that was okay.
That's probably one of his better games, too.
Well, he had one game early in the year. I think he caught a couple. But I guess the more – overlaying issue is like Julio is nowhere to be found on like the top. He's not even top 25 from past week, and he was like one of the number one. He was one of the number one receivers ranked going into that week going against the Houston defense and secondary. I don't think is like unbeatable.
Atlanta's greatest gift to the NFL this year is to trade that guy to a contender.
We can talk about that in our projections.
Because what a wasted weapon.
Yep. Cortland Sutton, who had a great game the week before. I mean, he was 4 for 92 and a touch, so that was good, but it wasn't the blow-up game of the week before. His counterpart, who's been pretty solid, if you really flying on the radar, Emmanuel Sanders, did nothing. Let's see. Keenan
Allen, there's another one. He had a horrid week, but he has been awesome.
Tyler Lockett, not much there. He did see the end zone. And so, I mean, that – it's good those guys see the end zone, but
Mm-hmm.
when they're like the one of your either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, if you play 3 wide receivers and flex, you're really kind of expecting more out of them.
Yep.
You got the why am I drawing that? You got we talked about DJ Chark having a big day. Actually, his counterpart, D.D. Westbrook, didn't do so bad either. He had 7 receptions for 82 yards. And I only say that because, I mean, you had Chark go for 164 and 2 TDs, and you got the Gardner Minshew kid slinging the ball out there.
Yep.
So, I mean, D.D. actually saw the ball just as many times as Chark. And, so they're... he was able to be productive, was what I'm saying, with another receiver on that team that same day going crazy.
Yep.
Last one I will touch on, Byron Pringle McCringle, whoever this guy is, had a great day.
Sour cream Pringles.
I mean, 6 for 103 to touchdown for KC. Don't know who he is. Again, Ty Hill expected to come back this week, so that guy will probably not be anywhere. Not worth rostering, but I just, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable, these randoms.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's kind of, I've said it before, you got certain offenses. Again, how I said about the Patriots, you've got this evolution of the Andy Reid offense, which obviously, what's going on with Kansas City. You're seeing that in Philadelphia. You've seen it in Chicago. Get a lot of weapons and spread the ball around, and every week it's so it's a fantasy headache, and they're probably right now from a wide receiver standpoint the best at it. And to make it all awesome and great again is who's coming back.
Ty?
Yep. So wait till that happens. So then we'll have all these people coming in. All right, so hit a lot on the wide receivers, a lot of activity this week to look at, some opportunities to maybe make some higher ceiling plays. But we're going to go move on to the tight ends. And,
I love George Kittle.
George Skittles.
I love him. I have him in one league that I am not doing so well, and he's like my savior. And I think he's going to continue to get better and better and better. Again, I think it's probably a product of the offense. They're going to smash you in the mouth on the ground, and that's going to open some things up. I don't think I kind of expected a little more out of Jimmy Garoppolo this past week. Wasn't like it was a bad game, but just managed it. But if that's the way he's going to do, Kittle's his guy, then I'm okay with it.
Yep.
We saw Gerald Everett, the tight end for the Rams, be the number 1 tight end in the weekend with 7 receptions for 136 yards. Look, when they had last year and the year before, I expected games, not necessarily to this level, but high productive games from this Gerald Everett kid. He is an athlete. Yep. He's probably out on the wire, and in a lot of the leagues that I look at, he's rated as the top pickup, especially for this week, as they go against San Francisco. Then San Francisco's D is pretty good, as we see, or at least it appears to be. But unless you've got, and there is in our league, I have Darren Waller, who's on a bye this week. And so I was looking for some folks, and somebody had actually dropped Jared Cook. So I'm going to go the Cook route just because I feel safer with that than Everett. Okay? I don't know that you will see this Everett production every week.
Yeah,
The past 2 weeks, it's been 8 receptions, 11 receptions. Prior to that, he had a total of 7 receptions.
Well, I think you have the challenge with this, and I think you bring up a good point, is it's 2 pieces to this puzzle. Number one, Cooper Kupp, and a tight end is usually, the best tight ends are the safety nets for their quarterbacks. Cooper Kupp is the safety net for Jared Goff. Plus, Jared Goff is not playing lights out ball, so that's another problem that you have.
I've seen the Everett kid have balls hit his hands and he drops them. He's
Yeah.
not like when the ball, he's not guaranteed to catch a ball even if he's open.
He DFS'd me one time.
Yeah.
with Everett. So if he would have just been respectable, not even those numbers, I would have won a few bucks, but he killed me. So you've got, here's the thing, is it's Kelsey, it's Kittle.
Ertz is solid.
I like Austin Hooper in this sense that Matt Ryan is so afraid right now in the pocket when I watch him that Austin Hooper seems to find the middle of the field. He does have that Arizona matchup. I don't like him so much for the Arizona matchup because I think that's been overplayed. At least at this point, I think Arizona's finally figured out that's a problem.
Number 2 fantasy tight end right now.
Right. But I just like him because he gets open and he does have sure hands. Like I don't see him drop a whole lot of garbage. So
he was a good pass catching tight end at Stanford. So I expected this right out the gate from him. It's just kind of taken a little while, and he's gotten better every year.
Yeah, and I mean he's a last look traditionally in this offense with 3 receivers that
Yeah, but they can't run the ball.
Right. So now he's
just sitting back, and then they can cover the receivers, and
that's what's leaving him open.
Covered.
Yeah, and then Will Dissly, I understand there's a point that he may stop scoring touchdowns, which is what they need. But it's happening, so
ride him out. Like in fantasy football, what you hope to get from your tight end is a touchdown every week. If you can get a touchdown every week, everything above and beyond should be gravy. Yeah, that should be what you expect as your floor, and that's what you should look for in a tight end.
Yeah. Like I would say this is the thing about the tight end position. If you've got Will Dissly and you've got major injuries or big failures at the running back or wide receiver spot, sell them high.
Yeah.
Okay, sell them high. But if you don't, even in an 8-team league, there's not 8 tight ends that are going out and consistently producing a number that you can hang your hat on. So take them because you're going to get, especially now, you're going to take them and run them with the upside. I mean, I'm looking at the number 7 tight end is Greg Olsen.
Yep.
That guy's feast or famine.
Yep.
And then you get the injury to throw in there. So, the guys like O.J. Walker, Noah Fant, some of these, or O.J. Walker, O.J. Howard.
Noah Fant. The Hawkinson, who's off.
You're on, you're off. Probably one to just keep an eye on, and maybe you stash him if you got the room. Could be Chris Herndon. He could be a good pickup.
I mean, he is very athletic, and he is a pass-catching tight end. It just
don't expect it in the first 2 weeks he's back.
Jets.
But those are guys.
Jets, that's your concern.
Yeah. But they need weapons. They're going to need somebody. And the closer you are to the line of scrimmage with this offense, probably the more likely you're going to get targets. So it could be a good thing. But, I mean, outside of that, you're playing matchup. Yep. If you don't have those top 4 or 5 guys, then you're playing matchup or ride the hot hand.
Yep. So looking into this week, Kelsey is going against Houston. I mean, these guys, you're going to roll them out. Kittle against the Rams. Hooper against Arizona. Could be the best one of the weekend.
Yep.
I know that Cincinnati had a little trouble scoring with the tight end on Arizona last week, and everybody thought Eifert. I remember I told you I thought Uzama actually was getting more snaps. He was, so he might have been the better. But neither of them got in there against Arizona, who's been a sieve to the tight end. Hooper is a different level than both those guys, so he could end up the best.
And my like of him is less about who they're playing and more about how he's playing. So that's a really good sign. You're not only getting a good matchup, but you're getting a guy that's getting the ball more and has become more of a safety valve for a quarterback that's getting a little jittery. He's not willing to stand back there in the pocket like he used to be and take those deep shots. So
Yep. And then let's see, you got we don't know about Evan Ingram. You're saying he could be out. Delaney Walker. For the most part, he's been solid as he always is. But the past couple weeks, he really hasn't done much. He only had 2 targets and 1 reception on each of those. You look for him to possibly get right against Denver because Denver does still have some edge rushers. If they could set the edge against Mariota and try to get after him, he may look for Delaney, who quite frankly is his guy.
I mean, you've got a guy like Jimmy Walker in the top 10, right? Or Jimmy Graham. I'm messing up name. Walker. I like Walker. Everybody's a Walker. You're a Walker. I'm a Walker. We're all Walkers.
Where's Rerun?
Jimmy Graham, I mean, if the guy doesn't score an 8-yard touchdown, then he doesn't get anything, that guy. And he's showing up in a lot of top 10. So, you really got to kind of pay attention to your matchups. I like your Jared Cook call. I think he's a safer. This is a position where if you don't have the top guys, you go safer and try to get some
like
points.
Like I said, I have Waller. Oakland's on a bye. I'm looking at Everett out there. I'm looking at Cook out there. I'm looking at Hawk out there. I'm looking at Jimmy Graham out there. It's just Vance McDonald, O.J. Howard. It's kind of, what's going to be my safest bet. And I in a game against Tampa Bay where I imagine there'll be some points on the board, and it is Teddy Bridgewater who It's not, Drew who can chuck it all the way downfield with great accuracy. I mean, this is a guy, I could see him dumping off and maybe even getting a touchdown. And that's what I hope for. A lot of talk about, obviously, you got a high-powered offense when Deshaun's upright in Houston. They've got a couple of tight ends there. The Jordan Akins kid is one that he's done well. Nothing out of this world, but had one game where it was out of control. And, Deshaun can get him the ball. I mean, like, he seems to be able to catch what's thrown to him because, I'm looking at his efficiencies, and for the most part, he stays pretty efficient. Not somebody I jump to get. Maybe it's a deeper league. Vernon Davis, maybe, because they're playing Miami, and that's the only reason why. But, yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking out there on the wire, you're dealing with buys. Right now, in my mind, like I said, I took Cook because I think that's the best play from what's out there. I was tinkering on the TJ Hawkinson thing because he was a little banged up. He's coming off a bye. It's Green Bay. It's Monday night. Maybe he'll get involved. But, in going with either Hawk or Cook, who I was trying to, I feel safer with with Cook, so I went with him as opposed to Hawkinson.
Sounds good, man.
Okay, so I think we're just a hair over an hour, and we are going to wrap it up, and we are going to take a moment, and then we're going to put up the first DFS cast of the year, and hopefully have more of those. But give a listen to this. Hopefully it helps. We appreciate it. Have a great day.
Life's the same, I'm moving in stereo. Life's the same, except for my shoes. Life's the same, you're shaking like tremolo. Life's the same, it's all inside you.